Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, I'm going to be revisiting a distro that I have done before, but it's been about 17 months or so since I looked at it, and that would be Intel's Clear Linux. So stay tuned right after this. Clear Linux is, as I said, it's a project that's done by Intel. And one of the things that it is sort of a showcase for running Linux on Intel platforms, but it doesn't just support Intel. I mean, it should run on AMD CPUs. I will be finding out this week because what I intend to do is my next video. I'll tell you about it at the end, but I am going to be doing it on AMD Ryzen. So yeah, hopefully it will run on AMD. I noticed some people have had problems with it in the past on AMD. Some people have not. Typical, right? I mean, it depends on who you talk to and what they're doing, what kinds of things are bringing it up. So, but all aspects of the system are optimized from the kernel to the development libraries to the compilers themselves. Everything has been optimized to run with x86-64. The other thing that Intel wanted to do was Linux is a bit of a mess. Most of the distros that are out there just scatter stuff everywhere. And I've talked about this before. So you have system files, operating system files, user data. It's mixed in with every directory under the sun. And going back to Unix and the way Unix was organized, and Intel realized this as well, that wasn't its intent. These file folders have specific reasons and specific purposes. And so Intel is trying to bring things back so we don't have our configuration files in user and opt and down in var. And instead, we're trying to push them into one place or several places that have to do with their purpose. So that's what they're trying to do. So they have organized things by user data, operating system data, and operating system files, also system configurations. There are some advantages for that. First, if I need to bring the system back to a known state, like a factory state, and I just, something went wrong, maybe the configuration is horribly blown, don't know what happened, somebody was in messing with stuff, I can default the system all the way back to a factory install without having to rebuild everything up again. I can just take the configs back. The other thing is that I want to be able to do Delta updates throughout the system. I don't want to just have to rely on transfer and everything like most distros do today. It takes a long time to do updates, and yeah, it takes so Delta updates should improve that because you're only sending the patches. So the other thing, other optimizations are to the compiler. So they optimize the compiler flags. They're not in digging around with the code so much, but more to optimize the compiler flags. But they compile twice in order to ship multiple libraries. The kernel ships, of course, with the latest Linux kernel. However, you can install an LTS kernel. There are other kernels that are built for specific purposes that you could use as well. For example, there's one that is built to support KVM. So, and the other thing is it it includes stage performance patches. It also leverages runtime optimizations and to auto select compiled binaries. The other three areas is underneath security. One is what they call constant vulnerability scanning. And so what they're doing here is they are actively looking at the CVE databases from NVD, which is the National Vulnerability Database. And then they see if there's any patches that have been created in order to be applied against those CVEs and get them fixed. And so that's the first thing it does, which is a good thing. It's something that you should do, but if you're using Clear Linux, you don't have to. It does it for you automatically. The other one is a unified trust store, and they're trying to build a single place to put certificates. It goes back to that everything is scattered all over the place. And yeah, so it makes it hard to look at your certificate authorities. And the other thing is to look at your certificates as well. Same thing there. Is the certificates may be approaching a time when they need to be renewed, or they may have already gone into, maybe they've been blocked. The other one is out-of-box industry standard security features, and what they're talking about here is standard packages like IP tables. Now they're not using NSF tables yet, but at least I will look for a bundle, but I did not see one on the initial install. They also install by default the SSH server and client. They install OpenSSH, SSL. They install IPsec VPN, which is OpenVPN, and signed update content. So any content you get from the Intel repositories is signed, so you know that it has not been modified, at least since the time it was created. The other one is the ability to do customization. Clear Linux does not use packages. They prefer that you use a tool called the Mixer tool, and the Mixer tool can bring in packages from RPM libraries as its default. But you can bring in tar images, source files, and you can bring them into the Mixer tool. And that will then be used to create Linux for updates for the Clear Linux OS. It also creates custom software that maybe you want. And it also allows them to create customized stacks of the Clear Linux distribution, so that if you're doing specific purposes like high performance computing or data analytics, etc., we'll talk more about it, all those stacks that are available. But if you're wanting to build a specific stack that has a particular footprint of software and libraries, you can build those up. So, and then of course to build the releases, and you have to remember that Clear Linux is by default a rolling release. So some of the things that, as I said, you can bring in source tarballs, and those can go into autospec, and RPMs are then generated or used from pre-compiled sources that go into the mixer that creates bundles. Bundles are it's really meant to, let's say like you're looking for network performance tools. So there's a bundle for that called Network Basic. And also there's some other bundles along that line as well. But if you're looking for basic diagnostic tools for the network and basic performance tools for the network, you can install all of those in one go. You don't have to individually apply packages. That has a couple of advantages. First, the tools that you have are linked with the same libraries, and you may not have that luxury under a standard distribution that's bringing in packages from multiple sources. So yeah, I mean, we've run into problems with that before. I have experienced problems with that. I'm sure that if you've used Linux for any length of time, you probably have too. The side load to an upstream Clear Linux, or you can create a custom distribution. So in other words, I can install my custom view of a bundle into my version of Clear Linux. I can also ship it upstream to the Clear Linux project, and if they adopt it, they will add it. So in the past, when I first started using Clear Linux, the number of bundles, of course, was pretty small, and they were pretty big. They included a lot of packages, and over time, the Clear Linux project team has been trying to break up some of those larger packages and offer pieces of it. They still offer the large ones, so if you want the whole thing, like a development suite, you can pick that whole thing up. But if you're a developer that only does Rust, then you may not be interested in C++. You may not be interested in Fortran. So yeah, you might leave those alone. So anyway, that's kind of where they're going with that. As far as the how the bundles and the updates are created, it's the same process. You have the RPMs, your source code that's going into AutoSpec. You have your RPMs that are built and are going into the mixer. And then you have your upstream Clear Linux OS that's used. That's why it's called a mixer, is because it's bringing all these things together. And out of that, you can produce Clear Linux distribution images. You can create updates for the distribution, as well as you can then use bundles. Now, the Clear Linux OS images, of course, are installed as you would a normal ISO file. But updates and bundles are updated into the system using swapd. And swapd is a special manager for bundles that allows it to do updates. It will try to do that, and then it will tell you if you have to reboot the system or not. The other thing you can run on Clear Linux, of course, is containers, and there are a number of them. Docker, of course, is supported. Is also Kata containers that are basically have a VM, very small, tiny VM that's assigned to the container to offer additional security. And then, of course, you have OpenStack and you have Kubernetes as well that you can bring into the mix. This is something new. This is Acorn. I believe that's what they call it, since the icon looks like an acorn to me. But this is trying to use Clear Linux server as a virtualization host. So this is a type 1 hypervisor. Acorn is a type 1 hypervisor, and it is optimized for IoT. It's optimized for real time. So, and as well as a standard service virtual machine. So you have I have not dug into it yet. Currently it is kind of in a state of its introduction. It's not really a fully supported production release yet. So at least I did not see anything on site where they said, oh, this is a production release. You can just deploy this out in your production environment. So right now, I think it's more of a, well, here's what we got. We're still kind of in a state of either development or testing or both. And they're still working on some stuff. So it'll be interesting to see, but it is intended to support, looks like small form factor devices, probably based on the smaller Intel architecture chips like Atom, and then it scales up to the Core and up to the Xeon machines as well. So you also have Clear Linux stacks. I mentioned this earlier, and some of those are data analytics stack, which of course would be the Hadoop style of applications. You also have database stacks, which are traditional database. You also have deep learning stacks if you're building into those environments, and AWS Greengrass stacks. High performance computing and media reference stacks. So if you're producing videos or you're producing audio, you can use the media reference stacks. Also, I think it also has links to printed media as well and web. The other stuff that you can add on to Clear Linux, of course, is they do support NVIDIA drivers, and those are the ones from NVIDIA. They are not installed by default, but it does support them, and you can do that. The preference for packages for you to install for yourself on a workstation is Flatpaks. Intel, of course, does not recommend that you use swapd to install your application suite. And they have a number of reasons for that. You kind of want the isolation that Flatpaks are going to offer you, plus the protection. There's trade-offs, ups and downs to doing it. They don't try to discourage you from using the standard swapd process to install something like LibreOffice, but they're really trying to turn the desktop environment into the Flatpak arena. Everybody is doing something along that line. And YubiKey, in order to do OTP, one-time passwords, and also it supports UTF. There's a number of other things that it does as well, so you can have basically two-factor authentication built into the Linux operating system so that you can use that. TensorFlow is also there, so if you're doing AI, deep learning, and that sort of thing, you can do that as well. Some of the deployments that Clear Linux supports is they do support deployment on Hyper-V. There's both the Hyper-V and Hyper-V LTS that they support. There's support for KVM, of course, and Parallels on Mac. I think that's version 14 and higher for that. And yeah, so, and then Proxmox 6.1-3, I think it is. But I'm going to actually install this on Proxmox 7 today and see if I can get that to work. I did run into some issues with it, and I'll show you what the issues were and what I did to fix them. VirtualBox 6.0 and higher it supports, and Virtual Manager it is supported. They don't have a specified version number for that. The other one is VMware Workstation is also supported, and I think that's version 15 and higher, and then VMware ESXi 6.5 and higher for that. Yeah. So you always, I mean, if you're on newer releases, you may run into issues with compatibility on hardware with VMware because they do deprecate hardware pretty quickly sometimes. At least it seems that they do that pretty quickly. Clear Linux deployment on the cloud. There are a number of cloud ways of doing it. They actually have a standard cloud, which is called a generic cloud install, which supports a number of them. So you might want to check with the installation guides that are on Clear Linux to see if there's a cloud environment that you're trying to deploy on that's not listed here. You might be able to use the generic method of installing Clear Linux. They do have specific kernels for Amazon Web Services and Azure. There is direct support for OpenStack, and that uses the generic method to do that. Same with DigitalOcean. There is specific kernels for queuing cloud, and that, of course, is a Chinese cloud provider, as well as the Google Cloud Platform or Google Cloud Engine. So, yeah, there are specific kernels for that as well. So, if you wanted to install it, so it's kind of from the edge to the cloud and back. So one of the things that have come up in the past has been telemetrics. Intel does optionally collect telemetrics on your system and what your system is doing. And the reason for that is to build log files that are indicating there are problems with the system. So they are up and down, not collecting information about any specifics on what you're doing. But, if you're collecting air data, of course, you could infer that kind of thing, and it is a concern. But the way it's doing it is they use probes that then collect information and send it to a service called the telmprobd. That then creates a spool on the client side. Telmposty is the one that actually posts the information to them. But optionally, you can change the direction of telmpost-D to point to one of your local servers instead. So you can replace the direction of where that goes. And that gives you the chance to go through the information before you send it, if you want to do that. And then on their back end, they bring it in and they have a collector and a way to access the telemetric UI into a Postgres database. So in the past, I have found evidence of the telemetrics running or pieces of it being available on the system, or that they were building files, log files. So, but in the last release, I did not find any evidence that there was a service that was up and running if you elected out of the telemetrics. So, yeah. Also, I included the command, if it is installed, if the telemetrics are turned on, telem control will be available to you, and from that you can then do a status. I did some extensive looks at the file system, and I did see log files that were collected under swepd, but that's just installation of packages. It didn't have a lot of information in it other than, well, if I was installing a package, the name of the package name, and I can show you that. It wasn't anything that I would be too concerned about. They know that anyway. I'm pulling the data from their servers. I also looked at Netstat to see if I could find any connections that were going out of the machine over to the system, and I did not see anything readily identifiable as telemetric. So I'll go that far. That's probably about as far as I can really say. So what do you need to run it? So you have to have a machine. It will not support BIOS. So if you're running on a system that only has a BIOS, you cannot run Clear Linux. It will not support it. You have to be on UEFI in order to do it, and there are some good security reasons for that. It also needs supplemental streaming SMID extension 3, extension 4.1, 4.2, and carry less multiplication. Now, in the past, they used to require AES, but I noticed that requirement seems to have been dropped. But they also do support AVX 512 instruction sets on the release as well, although they do not require it, but it will use it if it finds it. But yeah, it can run a compatibility check when you do the installation. Processor families, second generation or greater for the core. So Yeah, you can get back pretty fairly far back in time with those. Xeon E3, E5, E7, processor C series for the Atom, and E series also for the Atom processor. So a pretty wide selection of processors that are in here. You might run into some issues if you're running Celeron. Some of the older ones don't have a lot of the support that the cores do. I mean, they're so. What are the recommended ones? So they say 1 gig of memory is all you need, but I would say probably go with 4. They also recommend 4. 20 gig of disk. Now you'll find that it's probably going to actually install about 6.6 gig on the base install unless you pick additional packages during the installation, and I'll show you where that is. If you want to preload your system with some additional packages, you can do that. Device support with OpenGL is recommended, and the Intel HD UHD graphics, of course. If you have NVIDIA, I don't think it picks up the driver. I will find out this week on the AMD side because I do have an NVIDIA graphics card in that machine. I believe it's a manual install in order to support that, so it'll probably bring up the Intel HD graphics to start with. And then optionally an active internet connection, and you need that if you're going to be installing additional bundles beyond what is in the live CD. So with that, I think probably the first thing to do is let's go over to Proxmox and I'll show you what I did to make this work. Some of it was some trial and error, but yeah, I was able to get it to come up. I'll actually show you the error that I was getting as well. So let me go get set up and I will be right back. So what we're going to do is as you can see, I have it installed already, but that's from me testing. I'll go ahead and create a new one. And we'll give it a name. Let's see. And you'll want advanced on. And this is all fine here for this particular, for the OS. You don't need anything there. I'm going to go ahead and select my NAS drive, which has the Clear Linux. My version is a little bit old, but I think it'll figure that out. As far as Linux and 5.x, that's fine. You don't need to do anything there. And then we'll go over here to the system. And the graphics card, I'm going to use Spice. And then virtual SCSI, that's fine. The C BIOS, however, I need to change that to UEFI, and then I'll need a storage drive for that. And I'm going to put that on local. And then over here, I'll also need to change this to Q35. That's in their instructions, by the way. So, yeah. And yeah, we'll need to put this. We'll need to put that on a disk, not on a cluster. And then a CPU, there are some changes here we'll need to make. So the first thing I'm going to do is use their recommendations. So they recommend KVM 64, and then we'll come down here and turn on AES. So I don't know how old their instructions are, but apparently they must be fairly old. The rest of it is good. And then I could leave that, but I'm going to put mine at their recommended setting. Nothing else needed. And here I will need to change this to E1000, which is an Intel NIC. And I'll finish it. So that's following their directions. And this is what you will see when it starts up. Okay, so it started. And I'm going to open this up. And then it does the check and fails. Yeah, you can do that. So it has failed here looking for SIMD extension 3. So how do you fix this? Well, let's just go ahead and shut this down. Yep, close the session and we'll stop the VM. So I'll go back into the processors here. And we'll edit that. That's really where the problem is. And it's right here. Now there may be others of these that work. I just tried a couple, and yeah, Skylake does not work. I can tell you that. I went down here to max and I set that. And now, hopefully, I'll start it. We'll go into the console mode and launch Vert Viewer. And this time, it's passed. Yeah, okay. And it's starting up. Let me get this a little bit bigger so that you can see what's going on. Now, it will not hold on to these settings. I think I ran into that before as well, but that's okay. We'll give it more real estate here. I think I'm just going to do that much. I think that will be fine. I don't want to make it 1980 because then it'll cover up what I have at the bottom of the screen. All right, so all good. And so that's my system down there. This is their system right here. So just in case you want to know. All right, so this is where we want to go next. Now, if I just want to kick the tires on it, I can do that. So I'm just going to go up here. So this is the installation mechanism. This is a custom written C program, I believe. So I'm English. That's my default language. There at the bottom. And the keyboard is US. That's fine. I need to install it on some media. I don't want to do a safe. That's fine. We'll do a destructive. I could turn on encryption, or I could do an advanced installation, which brings up the partition tool, which allows you then to go in and partition this out the way you want it. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it manage user. All right, make sure that they match. Telemetry, it's default to off, but if you come in here, it will automatically switch it to on. So I'm going to implicitly tell it I do not want it. And then advanced options has the list of bundles, so you can pick and choose what you want here, but just remember you have to have a working internet connection available to the box that you're installing on in order for that to work. I am not going to do that. I can assign a host name. Otherwise, it'll assign a randomized serial number for the machine name. So I'm just going to give it a name clear2. And then you can choose what kernel you want. So, and there's extra arguments you can add to it if you want. I'm just going to run the latest because I'm interested to see if they're using .13 or not, which should be the latest LTS. I'm going to guess they are. Auto updates are enabled by default. That's fine. And then test connectivity. Let's do that. Just to make sure that yeah, okay. So we're good. And we're going to start the install. This will take a bit. So I'll be back when it's done. It is done and we're ready for a reboot. So let me do that. And while we're rebooting, I'll go back to the CPU selection. So I looked around on the forums for any information about what to do to enable the more advanced SIMD extensions, but most of the advice was to go in and modify the config file for the VM, and that did not work. Yeah, Proxmox wrote right over top of it. So I don't think that mechanism is going to work. In fact, it didn't. It failed to even launch the VM. So the only mechanism I could find that worked was changing the actual CPU type. It probably told me while I was yakking that I had to restart. Okay, now we're back up. Yeah, and it did not keep my settings for the screen size, so we'll go fix that. I think I had that problem before too. I think it did it the last time. Okay. All right, so we're good to go. Yeah, there's the most important part of doing any distro review, right? What do the backgrounds look like? That's nice. That looks a little bright for me. Nice green, some blue. I think I like that one. I guess the first thing we should do is go into the software and get this set up. Now, before it was a bit of a pain to get this set up, but that seems to have been taken care of. It looks like it comes pre-configured, which is nice. Let's see what is, yeah, these are all installed packages. Yep, extensions are here. So, yeah. Let's see. What do I want? Probably LibreOffice, since I seem to spend a lot of time in there at some point. Let's see. I want to go here. Oh, okay. That's interesting. So which one of these are you using? Unnamed. Okay. And I want custom font. And I probably are going to want this a little bigger in order for you to see what I'm doing, which that might help a little. And give it some real estate. All right. So the first thing we want to know, how much this, oh, quite a bit more than, well, yeah, because I just put out, I just put LibreOffice out, and that added about 2 gig of storage being used. So let's see, because normally it's about 6.6. Normally it's about 6.6. Another thing I want to know, 5.10. Okay, so that's the last LTS. I put in nothing. It tells me what to put in. Okay, so let's do a check update. That was good. Current version 3500, and we're not current, so we'll do an update. Looks like it's already running. There's swap D right there. Now we'll just wait for that one to finish. It's good. All right. So what did you update this to? Update it to later. So I probably should relog. Probably should, restart. The last thing I want to do is let's do that again. Oops. Single. All right. The next thing I want to do is wow, NeoFetch is here too. I have 5 flat packs installed. Let me install a bundle just so you can see how to do that. I think it's bundle add, and then I'll add user basic, and I think network. The 2 that I want. So I'm going to install 2 bundles. Those just have some editors and stuff. We'll check and see if Git is already installed. Yeah. All right. So wow, that went by so fast I didn't even see the version. You'll find that Clear Linux will outrun most of the other distributions. 67. Let's see where the problems are. Probably I'm going to guess binary file. Oh, it didn't discover it wasn't running oops. I have to do sudo. I bet there's not a default firewall up. Nope. So I didn't detect that. Probably because it's not in the place where it wants to find it. I'll bet you. So let's see if there's any other surprises in here before we move on. Go back up to the top. Yeah, same. The directories. Database required for locate. The run 8D. Okay. USB is enabled. DNS needs a fully qualified host name. Yeah. Need an audit tool. We need those protocols turned off. That's all the same. It did detect it right there. It didn't flash it as a error though, just as a suggestion. Maybe it knows I'm under a VM. Maybe. Let's see. What about glances? Oh, there's a bundle for it. Performance tool. I need sysdat and IOTop. So nice. All right, let's see what we got now. It is showing memory at 912 meg used. And of course, I have been using the system for a while. It looks like it got it to swap a little bit. There are 4 connections open. All right, what about telemetry? Normally, the telemetry logs would be in here. Oops. Yeah, normally they would be in here. There's the telemetry files for the bundle. See, they're bundle adds. There's some package missing. And then there's the update and verify. But I don't see the normal kind of telemetry that would be running. Let's see what's in the bundle. Oops, need another star. No, not an asterisk. Not an ampersand. Yeah, so and that's all it tells. That's all it says. Package name, version, result. Yeah, that's all it shows. Let's look at the missing. That was under the initial installation. Yeah, let's see. All right, what about update? I don't see anything here that's making me nervous. I mean, like I said, they know that I did this already. I mean, they're at the other end of the server. So if I'm afraid that they're collecting telemetry, I probably shouldn't update my system. Yeah, I don't see anything that would indicate. Now, let's see. So I have to add it. And it's not here. So, next. Yeah, I know there's easier ways to do this, but I want to see everything. All right, so I have some listeners up for SSH as I would expect. IPP, that's normal. Boot PC, yeah, that's fine. And ICMP, nothing. And the domain, no big deal there. Let's look for any sockets that look kind of weird. Those are all listening. There's the connected ones. Now, there are some that are unlisted, but nothing. Won't look for anything it has telling it. Nothing. So I don't see any evidence that there's any telemetry running on the system that's being transmitted out. Now, the only way to be sure would be to run, a capture on the network and see, yeah, a packet capture on the network and see what actually is going on. But yeah, I'm not seeing anything. As far as the system is concerned, it is very quick. I mean, this is running on a VM, and it's probably as fast as the hardware version, but we'll find out about that because I am going to be putting this up on, like I said, up on hardware. I am going to be playing around with Acorn and probably we'll do a video on that. So, what do I think of this? Uh, yeah, I've always liked it. It's the only concern I had with it was back when we found telemetry files when it was supposed to be off. And we did find log files that were turned on at that time. They apparently have fixed that. So that's good. That's a good thing. As far as the ability of the system, it is different than a Linux distro. It is very different. It works differently. But, that's okay. I don't mind that. Change is part of engineering. That's just part of life. So, yeah, I don't mind it being different. What I do like is speed. I like performance out of the machine, and you certainly get that with it. I don't know of anything else to talk about. If you guys have some specific questions about it, I have used Clear Linux on and off for probably 2 years now. The longest run I had with it was about 3 months. And then I self-destructed it in order to go test some other operating systems on the platform. So it wasn't because I didn't like it. It was because I needed the machine to do something else. So, yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how their type 1 hypervisor works and see what all it does. Now, there are some issues, okay? ZFS is not supported on Clear Linux. You can install it. There is some patches that the user community has pushed into Clear Linux in order for it to work, but it is not officially sanctioned by the Clear Linux development team. So that's one thing. There's also some other issues with it, but you can go out to the website. They're very open about it. They tell you exactly what things will and will not work, which is something I really appreciate about them. I mean, I think their development team is top notch, of course. So yeah, I don't have any problems with who's doing the development. I think it's awesome that they're working on a new version of Linux. So that's all I had for today. Hope you liked the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. And if you don't like it, you can thumb it down. That's fine. But tell me why. Tell me why you thumbed it down. Anyway, hope to see y'all again real soon, and bye for now.